Let's go on a journey together. I want you to close your eyes and think of the ultimate pickup truck. What does it sound like? What does it look like? What's going on under the hood? If you were thinking of the fire-breathing 700 horsepower supercharged Raptor R, then you're right. And if you were thinking of something else, you probably didn't pay too much attention to the title of this video. Today, I have gotten my hands on the most bonkers truck in America. I argue a little bit more bonkers than the Ram TRX. This is the new Raptor with an even more powerful engine under the hood than the regular Raptor. Now, it's not replacing the V6 Raptor. If you want one of those that is going to be less expensive, more attainable, etc. But if you want the ultimate truck, you want the Raptor R. Let's break it down. In a nutshell, the Raptor R is a regular Raptor with a 5.2-liter supercharged V8 under the hood, and pretty much everything that is optional on a regular Raptor becomes standard on this model. We have all the same sort of body modifications we find in the regular Raptor, the wide body treatment with this really large extra section added outboard of these LED headlights, blacked out grille up front. In fact, all the elements really are blacked out on the R, except for the R at the end of Raptor. As you'd expect, there's a red R on the front. There's a different power bulge on the hood. We have Raptor with that red R again there, and then a somewhat subtle supercharged V8 sticker on the hood as well. The format of the Raptor R is the same as the V6 model. We have the big cab up front, small bed behind there, and then the 37-inch tires that are optional on the V6 become standard on this model. As a result, we get a little bit less suspension travel in the Raptor R versus the 35-inch tire-equipped Raptor. But I think it's a worthy trade-off because these look better on the truck, I think, than the 35s. They are absolutely enormous, but if you are going to do the kind of things that the Raptor R is capable of, you want the 37s anyway. Although we give up a little bit of suspension travel, we get extra ground clearance because in a vehicle with a solid axle, which would be found back there in the rear, the only way to increase clearance between the bottom of the differential and the ground is to have a bigger diameter tire. But thankfully, even though we have increased ground clearance and those insane 37s, getting things into and out of the Raptor is just about as easy as a regular F-150 because everything might be higher up, but it's not as high as a Super Duty. So for me, at least, at 6 feet tall, loading cargo into the bed is absolutely not a problem. And we have all the same kind of features on this model as you get in a regular F-150, like the power closing tailgate, which is a nice touch. In my Lightning, I end up using the remote all the time because finding that button is a little bit tricky when the tailgate is open, but it's a really cool feature because you can also close it from the inside. As you might expect out of a performance pickup truck, this is somewhat business in the back, party up front. So we get the wide body treatment up front, but right here from the back head on, it looks very much like a regular F-150. There are fender flares and extra clearance lights on the side of the rear fender, but back here it is basically regular F-150. With a blacked out section here, this large rectangular area is black regardless of the body color you get. I think it blends a little bit better in the darker colors. It really stands out on the white model and the orange one, etc. Again, Raptor R right there, big exhaust tips right back here, and this has an active exhaust system, which is kind of cool. Hopefully I'll be able to pop a picture in here so you can see what's going on. There is an enormous muffler right around here in the vehicle underneath the bed, and it has 3 exhaust outlets from the muffler. 2 of them are valved, 1 of them is the quiet exhaust that is always used. Basically, if you're in the quiet mode, the valves are closed, it's going through that 1 single outlet, and it's very, very timid. If, however, you're in Baja mode, then they're just wide open, and it sounds absolutely bonkers, just as you'd expect. If you're the kind of person that found it absolutely soul-crushing that Ford went from a V8 engine in the first Raptor to a twin-turbo V6 in the next generation Raptor, then you might want to take a look at the R, because instead of that twin-turbo 6, we find a 5.2-liter supercharged V8 producing 700 horsepower. This is essentially the same 5.2-liter supercharged V8 engine that we find in the Shelby Mustang, obviously with a few very subtle tweaks for use in the Raptor. Ford hasn't detailed all of the changes versus the Mustang application, but they mainly have to do with the fact that this is an off-road oriented vehicle. It's mated to a standard 10-speed automatic transmission and, of course, a 4-wheel drive system as well. The 4-wheel drive system has a 2-wheel drive mode, 4 auto, 4 high, and 4 low. Then on top of that, it has all of Ford's latest off-road software profiles that can work with the traction management system and, of course, the 4-wheel drive system to direct the power around exactly where you need it. At the moment, I don't have fuel economy numbers for the Raptor R just yet, but you can bet that with a sticker price over $100,000 and the off-road mission and 700 horsepower, it's probably not going to be a high priority for the average person that's interested in a Raptor R. But taking a stab in the dark, I'm going to guess it's probably under 15 miles per gallon combined. Let's talk about what separates a Raptor and a Raptor R from a regular F-150. Obviously, we have the different engines. We also have the different body panels back here because this gets the wide body treatment. But the cab is the same. The internal dimensions of the bed are the same as well. The frame is modified versus a regular F-150, primarily for the attachment points for the suspension, because the suspension is a bit different. Back in the rear, we don't have leaf springs. We have coil springs on all four corners with a 5-link suspension in the rear, a double wishbone type suspension up front. That was done because they needed a lot of extra suspension travel. You can get about 13 inches of suspension travel in the regular Raptor. That drops down to around 11 if you get the 37-inch tires, which are of course standard on the Raptor R. We also get unique shocks with active dampers, both front and rear, extra cooling going on for the engine, a heavily modified exhaust system, and some extra components in terms of electronics here and there, depending on what was needed for the different systems in the Raptor. But other than that, it's basically the same F-150 that you know and love. So if it fits inside the cab of a regular F-150, or accessory-wise, if it bolts onto a regular F-150 and it doesn't interfere with the body panel changes, then it's probably going to fit on the Raptor R. The exception would generally be things like aftermarket bumpers that would bolt onto the front of a regular F-150 because of the added width. They would probably bolt on here, but they would look a little peculiar. Interesting twist, we do have these little Raptor guards right here on the inner LED fog lights because some states say that you can't have more than 6 beams pointing forward, and that would technically be 8. The majority of this interior is the same as the regular Raptor and the regular F-150. We have the row of auxiliary switches right up there by the controls for this large panoramic moonroof. I really like the auxiliary switches because it makes the interior a lot cleaner if you do plan on putting on your own accessories. Since this is a high-level trim, we have the optional Bang & Olufsen audio system with speakers integrated right here into the headrest. That's why we have a B&O logo right there. We have the Raptor logo, of course, with the red R. These seats are a combination of leather and imitation suede upholstery. They're both heated and ventilated, but interesting twist. They only have a 2-way lumbar support rather than the 4-way lumbar support that you do find on the Platinum trim. They also don't have the front seat massage functionality that we find on the Platinum. It'd be nice if someday they gave that to the Raptor. Over here we have more Raptor logos right there on the center console. Pretty traditional console shifter there. Some red accents like right over here on the side. Carbon fiber accents like on the lid of that double glove box arrangement. Moving over to the dashboard, we find the same LCD infotainment screen that we find in most F-150 trims. Interestingly, we don't find the big one from the Lightning grafted in here. I think that would have been kind of a cool touch for the Raptor R to receive. Bang & Olufsen center channel speaker right up there. We still have the Pro Trailer backup assist knob. This is, again, a very fully loaded F-150 in essence, in addition to being the off-roady one. This is the drive mode selector down here, surrounded by the 4-wheel drive controls, 4 auto, 4 low, 4 high. Push that for a rear locker. No front locker, of course, in the Raptor, just a rear locker there. Dual zone automatic climate control, Qi wireless charging mat. Basically the same center console we find in a regular Raptor with a regular console shifter right there. It's powered because this does have the fold flat work surface integrated with that petted center console. Over on the driver's side, we don't find a heads-up display, but we do find a large full-color LCD instrument cluster with all the usual features that you'd expect in an off-road truck, lots of different off-road views. We have a steering wheel with pretty aggressive sport grips, little red indicator there to show you the top of the steering wheel, and some of the best paddle shifters on a new vehicle. These are metal, they're really large, and they move with the steering wheel, which is my favorite. We have some Raptor-specific controls on the steering wheel. This R button right here pulls up the My Mode for the Raptor system, and you can adjust that. So if you want My Mode to be, for instance, the quietest mode, you can adjust those settings with these controls over here. So this is the steering effort adjust button, normal, comfort, sport, and Baja. We then have the damper settings here for the suspension, normal, sport, and off-road, and then the volume for the exhaust in 4 different levels. And then once you've set all those, you can then click and hold this R button to save them. So you can see right there, setting those settings over on My Mode. So if, for instance, I wanted to go back to, I don't know, say a sport mode there and off-road suspension, and I wanted it really loud, but then I pulled into the neighborhood and I don't want to annoy my neighbors, I can just press that R button and it will bring back all the settings. As we see in other top-end F-150 models, the steering column is powered and memory linked. We then have Raptor badging down there at the bottom. Then if we move back over here to the center of the instrument panel, again, if I push this button, we have the 360-degree camera system, with the front camera view, which is handy, and this stays active at higher speeds if you're in the off-road drive modes, because this is a pretty big vehicle. And as you can see, trying to look over that hood, it's a lot easier to take a look through this camera if you're going up a steep slope and you want to see what's just above the crest. It's a long way before the driver gets over that crest versus the very front of the vehicle where that camera is. So that definitely makes that a lot easier in a vehicle this size. As you'd expect, this is just absolutely bonkers fun. In fact, I'll give you a little bit of a secret here. This is probably the most fun I have had at a launch event ever. This is just so much fun to flick around on the sand. It is absolutely hilarious. So pardon me if I'm not paying attention too much to the camera, because this is just so much fun. The power comes on in a really linear fashion as well. So this doesn't have the turbo lag that you can sometimes get in a regular Raptor. And yes, I am deliberately seesawing the steering wheel just in case anybody is wondering, because it is that much fun. Now, the V8 engine obviously has that supercharged growl, but most importantly, the power delivery is very linear thanks to that supercharger. So it doesn't feel like the twin turbo 6. Now, there's nothing wrong with the twin turbo 6. It's just not a supercharged V8. And then thanks to the lightness that we find in the Raptor R, this is notably lighter than a Ram TRX, it certainly feels more nimble when you want to access that power. And that's probably the best thing, is this goes from mild to absolutely bonkers in really nothing flat. This is so much fun. And it's easy to see why people can get into trouble in Raptors, because of the amount of fun and the amount of power that is just instantly available. Also a factor not everybody's probably going to talk about is this 10-speed automatic transmission. The ZF8 speed in the TRX definitely shifts quickly, but this one seems to shift a little bit faster, and importantly, there are more gears to choose from. And that means that this always has the right ratio for whatever kind of stupid you're trying to do in the sand. And trust me, again, you can do quite a lot of stupid. At this point, you might be wondering, sure, but what about the rest of the Raptor R? Is it any good as a daily driver, etc.? I would have to say yes, this is a very mild-mannered vehicle if you put its exhaust into its quietest mode. Let's go ahead and do that now. So now it's in quiet mode, and I can give it a comfortable steering boost, so it kind of boosts the steering up there. You can see the rumble has completely evaporated because of that interesting exhaust back there in the rear with the active valves. And even if I want access to the power, I can just press on the pedal and I get a lot of power, as you can see, but it's definitely very mild-mannered when it's in its quiet mode. Versus a lot of performance vehicles, the Raptor has fewer compromises really than we find in the average sports car, because the pickup truck mission of the Raptor means that this is a little bit more supple, a little bit easier riding, a lot easier to live with, and interestingly also quieter in the cabin than something like a performance sedan or even a performance coupe. Now clearly, statistically, more people are going to spend time on paved road surfaces like this than on a sand dune like I was just driving on. But this is again where the very mission of the Raptor lends itself well towards the daily commute. The suspension is really well tuned because of that off-road mission. I think this rides a little bit better than the Ford Lightning, which has a fantastic ride for a half-ton truck in America because of that off-road mission. We have the coil springs in the back rather than leaf springs. It's still not an independent suspension in the rear like we have in the Lightning, keep in mind. So there are going to be times where the rear end is going to get unsettled on broken pavement on regular road surfaces like this. But a lot of that really is compensated for by the adaptive suspension system. And that's something that I really wish the Lightning had. Versus the Lightning, that can feel kind of bouncy out on some road surfaces, like you'd find in the average half-ton truck, but we don't find in this because of the adaptive suspension system. It can really help quiet down some of those suspension modes, make this feel more comfortable, a little bit less bouncy. And again, this is very quiet and very mild-mannered as long as you're gentle on the throttle. If I'm only using maybe quarter throttle, this actually sounds pretty quiet. But regardless of the drive mode you're in, if I slow down here a little bit and then just romp on the throttle, those valves are going to open up, and clearly it's going to definitely be quite loud. But that's exactly what you'd expect out of something that produces this much power. They simply couldn't produce 700 horsepower with the valves completely closed. They do open up a bit. But even in the normal modes, it's not going to be as loud as the Baja mode, and that's why the car tells you it's for off-road use only. Although, logically, I can see a lot of people buying this and just driving down the road in Baja. Sure, that can be annoying, but again, if you aren't into that, you can quiet things down. And speaking of quieting things down, I have to say that the cabin is pretty well isolated, even though we do have those 37-inch tires. This is, of course, a body-on-frame vehicle, just like most trucks are, so there is a decent amount of isolation between the frame and the cab. But even so, I had expected road noise to be more pronounced than it is. This is actually a very easy to live with truck. As always, it's a bit difficult to talk about fuel economy, but so far over a day of mixed driving, I've been averaging just under 15 miles per gallon. That's basically what I expect a lot of folks to get, as long as you're not doing a lot of high-speed driving or a lot of stop-and-go city driving. Over the last 337 miles, this vehicle, according to its trip computer, has averaged 11.7 miles per gallon. Clearly, there's going to be a penalty for accessing all 700 horsepower, and that penalty is, of course, fuel economy. Over on Facebook, a lot of folks were asking, is there as much supercharger whine as in the TRX? Well, if I floor it, you'll hear a little bit of supercharger whine on the inside. I think it's really well tuned. Not as much on the inside as we find in a Ram TRX. It's a bit more of a high-pitched supercharger sound, but on the outside, you definitely hear a lot in both vehicles. In this, you hear really just more of that raucous exhaust note in the back than you hear supercharger whine. So at the moment, the bottom line is, if you are looking for the most bonkers pickup truck in America, you're going to want to take a look at the Raptor R. Very similar formula to what we find in the Ram TRX, with a little bit more finesse, a little bit better power to weight ratio, and I think I like the sound of this engine a little bit better as well. I really love the Ram TRX, don't get me wrong, and if you are interested in a value proposition, it is going to be less expensive than this pickup truck. But there's a reason that the Raptor is a little bit better, I think, and that's because Ford has been at this game longer. This is now the third generation Raptor. Essentially, they've been doing this for a while, and they have more experience at building this kind of dude-jumping pickup truck than Ram does with the Ram. That's an excellent truck again, but I think this just comes across as a little bit sharper, just a little bit better polished. Unfortunately, all this fun does come at a cost, and that cost is $109,145, assuming, of course, you can get a dealer to sell you one at MSRP rather than some sort of wacky markup, as we're seeing currently on the V6 Raptor. Now, if you are interested in a Raptor R and you are not interested in paying $150,000 for one, then you need to spend a lot of time Googling and hunting for a dealer that won't charge you a markup on one. They do exist. It is possible to find them. I really suggest you do your footwork so that way we can discourage this kind of thing from happening with dealers across the US. It appears that for some reason on the West Coast, dealers are much more likely to charge a markup on these than on the East Coast. So if you're willing to travel, it may be worthwhile to buy your Raptor R somewhere else and road trip it back home. Now, at nearly $110,000 and definitely $110,000 after destination, this is significantly more expensive than the V6 Raptor. But that's exactly what you'd expect out of the ultimate pickup truck. And keep in mind that everything that's optional on the regular Raptor becomes standard on the Raptor R. Now, even trickier, though, is its comparison against the Ram TRX. The TRX is a lot less expensive than this, with about the same kind of horsepower, slightly lower performance, of course. Versus the TRX, the two vehicles are obviously very capable. This has a slight edge when it comes to capability, thanks to the 37-inch tires that we have on here. Also, the lighter curb weight of this. It's not an enormous difference. It is a few hundred pounds, however, and you will notice it on trails like the ones that I've been on today, sandy trails especially. The lighter the vehicle, the less likely you are to get stuck in the sand. And in this situation, the 37s also help out with the Raptor R. So this is going to be less likely to get stuck if you're the kind of person that wants to go out to the dunes and play around in your Raptor. And that is something that I would encourage everybody that owns a vehicle like this to do, because it is an absolute hoot and a half. This is probably, again, the most fun thing I have done in a very long time in a pickup truck. When it comes to availability, availability is scarce on pretty much everything in this segment, the three entries, and that would be TRX, regular Raptor, and Raptor R. But this is probably going to be the one that is the most difficult to find, at least initially. Ford hasn't said exactly how many they will build or exactly what they expect the sales to be, but most likely about a quarter of Raptor models will have the supercharged V8 engine under the hood. Let me know what you think about that in the comments section, and what are you interested in if you're looking for the ultimate truck? Are you interested in something like this with the ultimate in off-road capability, or would you rather get a different kind of ultimate truck, something like a new Super Duty in the F450 trim? Would you be looking at something like a Ford Lightning, which is not far off of this in terms of its price tag, especially now that Ford has raised its price tag? Obviously a very different kind of vehicle to this, but still very similar in terms of its interior fitment, functions and features, etc. And in some ways, I do like the Lightning's interior just a little bit better if we're talking about the top-end Platinum trim. Some of the interesting things in here are that we don't find for this top-end price tag, the top-end platinum seats with the massaging capability, etc. I do wish that Ford would offer that in the Raptor R because this is the crowning model in the F-150 lineup. Let me know what you think about all that. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Hit the like button if you haven't done so as well. Leave a comment down there. That does help out our viewing statistics. Find me over at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the social places. And then, of course, run down to your Ford dealer if you want to get on a list for a new Raptor R. I'll see all of you later.